All right. Well, welcome back, hopefully, to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I think, Jim, that we're coming up on this might be 52. This might be the end of the season. If and we'll need to figure out how to celebrate that in some capacity online. But whether it's 51 or 52 or 53, we should be proud of what we've done. It's been fun,
The milestone of 50 is
yeah,
definitely worth
yeah. And I'm definitely
celebrating.
looking forward to continuing this, getting this message out to more people because as you said earlier, the feedback we get when we do bring it up is very positive and kind of uplifting. So um, today we're going to talk about the topic is going to be critical thinking. And you and I have spoken about this in great detail over the years and more recently, just before we hit record. There's a lot of meat in this topic. I think it's a very important topic. I think what you said earlier, Jim, in terms of our wheel, our flywheel, the foundational flywheel that we use with the 5 areas of life, at the center of this, I think critical thinking comes as a result of significant self-awareness.
Mhm.
And I think part of the reason that we don't have a lot of critical thinking in our society right now, in my estimation, is because we're lacking in self-awareness as well.
Mhm.
And collectively, I think, this touches on all the areas, the 5 areas, whether it's health or profession or worldview, money or relationships. I think we can probably dabble in all of them. We'll see where it goes. I thought I would do what I've done before, and that is read the definition. It's just basically a Wikipedia definition. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is the analysis of available facts, evidence, observations, and arguments in order to form a judgment by the application of rational, skeptical, and unbiased analysis and evaluation. And that's a lot to fit into a conversation. But I said it to you earlier, and I'll throw it to you, Jim. But one of my favorite words in that description is unbiased.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, first of all, like you said, I think what's evolved, over the last 50 something weeks is it always comes back to self-awareness. And we've created the same framework that works because it breaks up these 5 areas of our life that are all connected. It's the flywheel that's going on whether we're aware of it or not. And it starts with ourself in the very center. And then of course, the five areas, which are no particular order. And that's our profession, that's our health, mental health, and physical health, our relationship with others, men, women, wives, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, whatever it is. And then our worldview, how we see the world. That's timely as of what happened yesterday, right? I don't think we want to get into the topic of yesterday, but it was a turning point for our country that we're very divided. We have these two groups, and anybody celebrating what happened yesterday with Trump, probably doesn't understand the big picture. So,
Yeah,
wouldn't say they're critical thinking. Yeah,
just to clarify, not and sorry to cut you off. That
that's
what
okay.
happened
Yeah,
yesterday was Donald Trump was convicted.
yes,
And so
yeah,
just to put it in context, and whether we want to get into the details of that or not is, I guess up to us. But
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, who knows when someone's going to be listening to this,
Thank
you
you,
know?
Mark.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and then so yeah, they're our best self. The other thing I think as we interact with people, you really appreciate critical thinkers, and there's not that many of them. And
Hmm.
it's not something I think that comes natural to everyone because, as we mentioned, our educational system is designed kind of the opposite, right? It's designed to conform,
Hmm.
um, and it doesn't allow critical thinking, or certainly doesn't reward it. And again, I've talked about this several times, but being dyslexic, it's one of our superpowers is critical thinking because we
Hmm.
see in big pictures, we don't see things like everybody else, but it clearly is something that's innate and it becomes very natural to dyslexics. So I like the
it's
topic.
yeah, no, it's interesting. I appreciate that perspective. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I do fancy myself as a critical thinker, and I was wondering why that is. Why I go way, way back to my childhood. And I've told you this before, when I questioned my Catholic faith to
Mhm,
my father, who's one of the most faithful people I know,
mhm,
and anticipating him being upset with me and him turning around saying, "You question everything, Mark. That's how your
mhm.
faith gets
Yeah,
stronger." And I
yeah.
think that's when I started thinking, critically thinking is the only way to think,
That's
right? It's
great.
like
Yeah.
going into and like question authority. Don't
Yeah.
why are we doing this way? Well, it's because we've always done it
Hmm.
this way.
Yeah.
That's a bullshit answer. That's I don't do anything because
Yeah.
it's the way I've
Well,
always
that
done
was
it.
that was a gift that your father gave you. You're
It
right, because
was.
because
It
because
was.
if early on, if he reacted differently to that, then your pathway would have been very different. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and
interesting that he again, he's a pilot, so it's not somebody that doesn't appreciate that structure and to conform, and those are life threatening things that if in his work that have to be followed. But he is creative in his own way, it sounds
it's
like.
a nice combination to acknowledge the fact that rules and law are necessary to avoid anarchy
Yeah.
and to create civilization where people can live coexist peacefully while also questioning everything. Because when I think of that, you know what I think of, Jim, is I think of science,
Hmm.
and the hottest scientific topic now is climate change.
Yeah.
And there is a body of people that will tell you the science has been decided. And I'm like, no, there is no science that's been
Yeah.
decided. Science is about discovery, and discovery is constant, you
Yeah.
know? So when you take this concept of critical thinking and you step back and you go, what if I were able to apply this to every conversation in my life? Wouldn't those conversations be richer? Wouldn't
Hmm.
they be more helpful? Wouldn't they be more beneficial? And who the hell am I to think that I know everything about everything? That's
Yeah.
bullshit. No one
Absolutely. Yeah.
does.
Yeah. So, yeah. So again, beginning back to it, it just makes us better, and that's our main goal, our main objective of doing this weekly podcast is for guys, particularly imperfect men, because we all are,
Mm-hmm.
are self-aware of this, and to be the best version of themselves. And it starts with critical thinking, because I think you would agree, if you've just happened to run into somebody, meet him for the first time, and they're a critical thinker, you go, wow, that guy was impressive, or I really learned something from them. But people that are not, you walk away like, what a waste of time that was, or
Yeah.
what a douche that guy
Yeah.
was, right?
Yeah.
Because he's so let's break it down, because I did throw up this one kind of infographic, and it has these areas, and then we'll break them down. But critical thinking's in the middle. Uh, Again, no particular order. One is research, listening, explanation, flexibility, fairness, objectivity, evaluation, and analysis. Those are the how many is that? Those are the I guess say pillars of critical thinking. Do you?
Yeah, and I think the fairness and objectivity ones could just as well have been the unbiased position. Walking into a conversation thinking, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
Chances are the person I'm talking to has some information or maybe an observation or an assessment or two that might be of interest to me that I could use in factoring in any conclusions I might come to, as opposed to I'm right and you're wrong and you're an idiot and I know everything. It's like those are huge differences in how you approach a conversation.
Yeah.
So, I've talked to you about many kind of polarizing topics. We agree on, I would say, most things, but we don't agree on everything, which is kind
Hmm.
of fun. And I think that going into conversations, I always try and I've said this to you many times. I always try and tell myself, don't try to be right. Don't try to change anyone's mind. Don't try to, have no ulterior motive, right? And I
Hmm.
think maybe the most important component of critical thinking, and you could argue they're all equally important, is listening. Because if
Yeah,
you're
let's start off with
listening,
that. Yeah,
if
let's break it down from listening, because I think you're right. If you're
you're
listening,
open,
you're
you're
open.
open.
You want to understand, their perspective, their position. So yeah, I'm glad you started with that one. That's let's just start. That's the most important thing. Listen to somebody. Don't say anything, even if you want to say something. Hear them out as much as you possibly can,
Mhm.
and then I like what's next, and then explanation, and then try to at least um, say something that uh, validates that what they said was true, or even better, if you can do this, what is an outcome from that information, a win-win outcome. Like, how could I learn from you, and how can you learn from me? And then, but explain in advance what the what success looks like after the conversation, or how we both can walk away learning more than had we not met one another, or we didn't have this conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that I think when you listen, all these other things kind of fall into place. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, the other thing that strikes me about critical thinking, and we've talked about this before, is what do words mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like the two topics that pop into my head when I talk about words, one is feminism and the other is abortion. And these are both potentially polarizing topics,
Mm-hmm.
but I won't talk to anybody about either one of them or any topic for that matter until I say, okay, what does that mean to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you say to me, feminism is equal rights for everything for men and women, then I'm going to tell you I'm a feminist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't clarify that and we don't have that part of the discussion because of what I believe in my grander worldview, you're probably going to conclude that I'm not a feminist. And
Mm-hmm.
then you'd be wrong, you know? So the importance of what words mean, because I think we've bastardized the English language a great deal over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And, I mean, male and female, they don't mean what they used to mean anymore either. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that when you walk into a conversation and you go, okay, I have some bias because I know a little bit about this person. I have some preconceived notion, but I'm going to do my best to put that to the side
Mm-hmm.
and remain open to the possibility that I might be incorrect about some portion of my position on this. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's all you have to do. And if everyone did that, there would be less vitriol, there would be less hatred, there would be less personalization, and we'd be more civil. I mean, maybe it's not that simple, but it sounds that simple to me.
Yeah. Yeah, this I'm interested in to the more I'm staring at this infographic, and it says explanation, but doesn't. I like to approach a conversation by what can I learn, right?
Hmm.
And maybe that falls under explanation, but what can I learn from this person that had I not met with them, or had not had this conversation, that I won't leave learning something that I didn't know without their explanation, or listening to them. So
Hmm.
I think learning belongs in here somewhere. The next one is
Yeah.
flexibility. I do think if you want to learn, you have to go into it being somewhat flexible in your position. Now, it doesn't mean that you give up everything that you believe or stand for, but I think you have to be open-minded enough to have some flexibility in your pre established positions or thoughts.
I think the what makes me think about when you say that, and I agree with you, is do you know everything about this particular topic? Is it
Right.
possible that you know everything? No,
Yeah,
it's
that's part
not.
of the learning, right? You want to
That's no,
learn.
it's not. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. There's no way. I mean, I don't even know everything there is to know about career development, and that's
Yeah.
my sacred spot. I'm an expert in that. I know more about that than most people, but I
Yeah.
know that there are people out there that could share context with me or an experience with me or a technique with me that I would
Mhm.
go, I'm going to put that one in my quiver because I didn't know that, or
Yeah.
I didn't look at it that way. I never looked at it that way. So yeah, I think flexibility is extremely important in the context of how we just use the word.
Yeah, I agree. Next one is fairness. And yeah, you talk about subjective, right? Who gets to determine what's fair?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that word almost irritates me, right? I call it the thought police. Who gets to walk around and determine what is fair?
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
because they hold themselves as the authority of who establishes fairness, are they even fair? And the answer to
Well,
most of them is probably not. So
yeah, it's I think that again, the thing that strikes me is I think that maybe this is the spirit of the use of this word in the context of critical thinking, that you can attempt to try and be as fair as possible in the things that you say and the way that you say them, while also acknowledging that life is not fair. It's
mhm,
it's more of a journey than it is a destination, I think. You
yeah,
know, you can be fair on the way and try to be fair and objective while acknowledging the fact that true fairness is really kind of a myth,
yeah,
you know.
and know that going into it, that there is
Hmm.
no authority that gets to establish what is fair and what is unfair.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I think,
Yep.
again, I don't want to make this a too political episode, but I think that's what fundamentally bothers me about DEI.
Hmm.
Somebody established what they believe is fair. That doesn't mean it's fair to everybody. In fact, in some ways, it's kind of productive because it's doing exactly what you're trying to stop one group from doing to do to another group. And,
Well,
and
this is an
that,
interesting concept. This is I'm glad you brought it up because as you well know, I mean the human resources, talent acquisition, staffing space is just shouting about DEI, or they
yeah.
were a couple of years ago, but it's also going away in my estimation. It
Well,
feels like it's going away because, and you and I talk about this all the time,
yeah.
sports, what's
Yeah.
where did I learn a lot of the stuff that I learned? Well, playing team sports because there's nothing fair about it, right? And it's a complete meritocracy. Nobody should care what anybody looks like, what color they are, how big they are, how small they are, how quick they are, what religion they are, what country they're from. If I'm playing basketball, I want the four best guys on my team. I
Yeah.
don't care,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'll share a little side story. As you know, I was traveling last week, right? So I attended
Mhm.
a conference in Chicago. It was very, very well run conference. Probably one of the best I've ever been to. It wasn't cheap, but it was Circularity 2024,
Mhm.
big conference. It was at the Marriott Marquis in downtown Chicago, next to the McCormick Center, the convention center.
Mhm.
Sure you've
Mhm.
been there, but very, very well run. But my only, I don't know, it's criticism, but my only observation was they really, this outfit that ran it, which did a fantastic job, really went out of the way to embrace, I don't know what you call it, diversity. So they had all these groups, LBGT, the black group, the women's group, and all this. And I almost didn't want to go because I was like, this is so dividing. Why is this necessary, right? And then there was always, and again, I'm the overall conference was well worth it. So they did a fantastic job. I just, to your point, Mark, I hope we get to a point we don't have to start grouping people apart. It's not good. It's not good for anything. Maybe it was necessary at one point, but when you have to have all these special groups, all you're really doing is just chopping up people into these individual groups, and it's not inclusive at all. It's just the
Yeah.
opposite.
Yeah.
That was my experience. I can't speak for those people. Maybe they like having their own, um, you know, support system, whatever they call. But it almost became uncomfortable because it was so
Yeah.
obvious that they were going out of their way to appease or accommodate this one group that was clearly in the minority of the minority, and those people didn't need that. They were already part of the. It was. Oh man, how do I describe it? It's the worst of elitism where
Yeah.
one group has elevated themselves. Well, they determine they have to create these special groups. And I think personally, it's if I was one of those groups, and I guess I could find one to belong to if I really wanted to. Not the LBGT one, I can tell you that one.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, not at all. But that wouldn't be the one I would. I would jump into. Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost demeaning. It's almost holding them down. Like,
Yeah, you know what? It makes me think of the whole victimhood thing. I think
yeah, victimhood.
because we're pushing victimhood so much,
Yeah,
and that if you take victimhood and put it up against critical thinking, you cannot think critically if you're playing the
interesting.
victim. You just
Yeah,
can't. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
the more we push victimhood, I mean, and look,
yeah,
dude,
yeah. It's a
if it
good word,
doesn't
Mark.
work for,
It's an appropriate word for what has evolved over the last year. Maybe this is what progress looks like, right? But
Mhm.
well, let's get on to the next chapter because it's getting uncomfortably uncomfortable. Uh, to be as this to continue to be forced on us.
Well,
Uh,
it's funny. My calendar popped up a reminder for tomorrow, and I'm like, "What do I? Tomorrow's
yeah,
Saturday. What do I have for tomorrow?" And it pops open. It's like the first day of LGBTQ celebration month, and I'm like,
month.
you know,
Yeah.
how about where's white middle-aged guy month? That's when you say it like
Well,
that,
when you
it
say it like
sounds
that, they would say that's every day, but
that's right. It's fucking stupid, is what
yeah,
it is.
it is
It's
also.
stupid.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like the Morgan Freeman comment about, I don't want Black History Month. And he goes to
yeah,
Morally Safer, who's Jewish, and says, "Well, when's Jewish History Month?" Well, we don't
yeah.
have one. How
Yeah.
arbitrary is that?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree.
it doesn't, diversity, equity, inclusion doesn't make sense in a critical thinking way
Yeah.
because it doesn't work everywhere. It doesn't work in sports. It doesn't
Yeah.
work with aviation. It doesn't work with medicine. You
Yeah.
want the best people. You want the most qualified people. It's a
Yeah. One
meritocracy.
last
Whether
comment
we're
on this finish because we're beating this one up pretty good, and I think
yeah,
it's well diverse. Deserved. That's the other one. Every time somebody, you could tell this is old thinking, right? I'll just call it 2000. I don't know, 21 or 22 thinking, right? When somebody has to start off by something saying the first, fuck me. What do you mean the first? The first woman? The first black? How about why do they have to say that? Right? They
yeah,
don't need to say the first. It's like
yeah.
it's almost like they're discounting that. How about they were the best at what they did in their category
Mm-hmm,
and they don't have to be the first.
mm-hmm.
But that I don't know why that one irritates me so much because it's unnecessary, right? It's I think it dilutes the achievements of the person that did that. And and
Yeah,
and we need to
I
move
think
on to that one, but that's the
yeah, I think that what seems to be happening as a result of our identifying this topic and then talking through it a little bit and then beginning the recording is it's really at the center of everything because
yeah,
if we could all work on our critical thought, on thinking critically,
yeah.
all these other things would start to get better
They do fix
because we're
themselves.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah.
they almost would. If you take it and
Yeah.
extrapolate it out over a period of time, you're like, I'm trying to be fair when I communicate. I'm trying to be objective, not be biased.
Well, that
And
sets
then,
up our next one, which is objectivity.
yeah,
So, nice segue right into that one, right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
do think I love that word objectivity. You have to go in. I think everybody should go into a conversation. What is the objective? What do we both want to come from this conversation, right? And
Mhm.
establish, maybe create some assumptions that the assumption is we both can learn and walk away with information that had we not had this conversation or this exchange of thoughts and ideas, uh, we're both better off. But you have to be objective, and I don't.
Well, it's quite likely that you know some things I don't know, and
Yeah,
I know some things you don't know.
yeah,
How about that for a start? Isn't
yeah,
that like true of everyone? You know?
yeah, yeah.
And
I
so,
don't. I don't want to get into. And that's kind of a ridiculous question, but I'll ask it anyway. But do you believe people are objective? Do you what
no, I
percentage
think
of
we
the people
talk.
that
No,
you interact with do you believe enter a conversation uh, that have that is that are objective that have
well, I think that it's kind of like fairness to me. I mean, objectivity is a pursuit, but we're inherently flawed in that regard because
yes,
human beings are emotional. So
sure,
you need to, at least I do, when I go into a conversation, particularly with someone with whom I disagree, I'm constantly reminding myself internally of all these things, but I'm going from an emotional state back to an objective state and from
mhm,
an objective state back to an emotional state because he said something or she said something to me that made me angry or
mhm,
made me curious or anxious or fearful or whatever. So it's a moving target, but it also if it remains your target, if it remains your north star and you're always moving
mhm.
back toward it, maybe that's the best you can do, at
Yeah.
least from my
Yeah.
perspective.
There's a saying that I've used it for years. I don't know why recently it's come back even more. And because it applies to everything. Somebody asked for some just kind of life advice recently. And this is one of the things I shared with them. And it was to get what you want, give others what they want.
Hmm.
And because we are by nature selfish beings.
Hmm.
That's a makeup of a human, right? We think of ourselves first. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how we're hardwired to survive. But I do believe if you go into a conversation or you meet somebody, whether it's over at a restaurant or whatever you're doing, if you could work towards giving them what they want, you get what you want. But if you
Hmm.
enter with the mindset that in order to get what you want, you have to take it from somebody else,
Hmm.
it doesn't go very well most of the time,
Yeah.
unless you're in a
Well,
position of authority. And even if that is the case, that's just very temporary. That's not gonna that may get you the immediate result you want, but eventually they're going to come back around and
Yeah,
get you.
no, I remember listening to Dennis Prager, the conservative talk show host, and he was interviewing a rabbi, both of whom were religious figures and scholars, and the topic was relationships. He does a relationship hour where he talks
Yeah.
just about men and women and marriage and dating and things regarding that. And somebody called in, whether it was a woman who called in, and she was complaining about her husband in some capacity. This was years ago. And the rabbi listened and basically turned around and said, well, I think it would be more effective if instead of going into this next discussion with your husband saying, what can he do for you, bringing what can you do for him?
Yeah.
Because that's it's to your point. If you give the other person something that they're looking for, they're more than likely going to give you back what you're looking for.
Yeah.
It's kind of a counterintuitive thing. Like
It is.
this is
It
your
is.
fault.
Yeah.
This is your well, wait a second. Maybe
Yeah.
it is, but what can I do differently that maybe makes it easier for you to change your stance or think differently about something?
Yeah.
We have an obligation, I think, to bring some generosity to our conversations, to your point, because
Yeah.
it's more likely going to spur that other person to be generous in
Yeah.
return.
I do think some people are just hardwired to believe that there's no such thing as a win-win, that in order for you to win, somebody has to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that is true in sports, as far as the final score. But I think with interactions, everyday interactions with somebody, I do believe you can have a win-win in most cases if you work towards that and you establish the assumptions in advance. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
what does a successful outcome look like to you?
Yep.
And
Yep.
often we don't even do that. We don't even take the time to determine, which is one of our things, right? Yeah, to determine what success looks like on the
Yep.
outcome. So
No, I mean, if you take the sports thing back and you just pick the NFL, for instance, and
yeah.
growing up, the Patriots were terrible when I was growing up, and then they became really good in my
Mhm.
adult life. But I remember the Buffalo Bills went to four Super Bowls in a row and lost all four of them.
Mm.
So did they lose, or can they all brag about the fact that every single guy on that team went to four Super Bowls in a row?
Wow.
Right? So
Yeah.
now it becomes how you look at things. Because to
Yeah.
me, you could say that was a loss. That was crushing, particularly the fourth one. Or you could say, almost no one else in this league has ever been to one, and I've been to four. So,
Yeah.
you
Interesting.
know,
Well, I'll speak to that. I've been to the national championship and lost twice, and it still haunts me to this day.
yeah.
Those big games like that, they're worse. They haunt you forever. It's
And
funny,
I,
like you
but
said, I
I,
could look at it as, wow, we were good enough to get to that point. But when I think of those moments, I think of failure. I don't think of the
Well,
success that got us there.
let me bring some perspective back to you because I've listened to you talk about your rugby career
Mhm.
and all the great guys that you met and all the wonderful experiences that
Yeah.
you've had and all the lifelong friendships and all the traveling. And so, yeah, I totally get those two losses. I can't empathize because I didn't get there myself, but I know what it's like to lose a big game.
Mhm.
But I would call your overall rugby career a slam dunk success. So
Well, yeah,
for
that's
what it's
because I ended up getting, one or two of those in the end, the championships, right? The big one. And if it hadn't been for that, I don't know if I would have saw it like that. But anyway, we'll move on to the next one. So the next one is evaluation.
well, I would call evaluation, analysis, and research the work that you need to do
Mm.
to validate and vet whatever your position in. That's where the discovery takes place. That's where you leave the conversation and go, I care about this issue, whatever it is, enough to want to know more. And talking to this person critically, thinking me and this other person, I'm now faced with some new information and I want to go validate some of that, whether it's true or whether it's false, whether it's an opinion or whether it's a fact.
Mhm.
That becomes rather difficult in this world of the internet where people are saying things all the time as facts when they're in fact not their opinions. So, but I think that no one, myself included, probably does enough critical work in these three areas.
Mhm.
I'm going to evaluate what was just said. I'm going to analyze everything that to be considered. And then I'm going to go do some independent research to try and validate it again.
Mm.
But I still am very
Well, you
careful,
just
Jim.
checked
I don't,
off the next two. I don't know if you did that. intentionally or
I kind of
naturally?
look when I looked at them, I saw them as all
Yeah,
the same. You know,
I
they're
see.
all
I
just
see. Yeah.
different forms of the work that needs to go in. If you care enough about the issue
Uh,
to want to be a thought leader in that space, then you're going to do that analysis and research and evaluation. Or, and this is perfectly fine in my mind, just keep it as an opinion. You know,
uh,
if you don't want to do that work, just don't claim it as a fact. Just say, this is how I feel,
yeah.
because you're completely entitled to those emotions. But the mistake that we make, I think, is we accept things as facts that are not facts, and we claim things to be factual that are simply our opinion. You know, I
I
think
see.
that's,
That's why you're throwing evaluation, analysis, and research kind of all into one. But
yeah.
I do think an evaluation of the facts or the true history as we know it is important, and an analysis, right? Throw some math at it. Like what is, again, what is the desired outcome? Is it based on percentage? Is it based on there has to be, I think it, all critical thinking includes some arithmetic. I think
Mhm.
everything is math, the whole everything. So
Most
if you don't
everything.
have some analysis or some a metric to measure uh, the conversation in one way or the other, I think it can get, yeah. Here's one, like I said, God, there's so many good ones that have become part of a, let's just say, an American narrative
Hmm.
that has no mathematical support, right?
Hmm.
The one that we've talked about this before on this is that black men being killed by white police officers,
Hmm.
and then you do the math, and the math's not even close, right? First
No.
of all, there's unarmed and armed.
Hmm.
There's no evaluation. There's no research that actually supports the narrative.
Or even worse, we have formed our opinion
Yes,
that
that's where I'm
police
going.
officers are racist, and therefore we seek out math that supports that notion, even if it's not
Yes.
true, right? And so, and I think you can say the same thing about carbon dioxide, which is, you know, I remember my brother's story, and
Well, hold on, just before you move on to that one though. But let's just say you seek out that's not true. No, you can twist numbers. Everybody does it, right? You can take any number and leave out maybe some. It's not a lie, but leave out some supporting
mhm,
information
yeah,
that supports your point. But yeah, let's just talk about this one, because if you look at the overall population of Americans and then you do the arithmetic backward, it doesn't, it's an insignificant issue in the
hmm,
scheme of the larger things, right?
yep,
So
yep, yep. No, to me,
and
it's
the
the
media is
same. It's like,
very good at that, of taking things
yeah,
out of context in order to divide us or to irritate us.
yeah, context is a big word. I think
Yeah.
we lack context in a lot of the stuff that we talk about. But to your point, in the specific arena of unarmed black men being shot by white police officers, the FBI statistics in 2019, and I could be off a year, but it's a recent number. There was 8 in the entire year. And I think
Wow.
6 or 7 of those are on camera or in front of eyewitnesses as having resisted the police officers.
Yeah.
So it's not just insignificant, it's almost non-existent,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But to say that even in the face of that data
Yes.
is gets a whole segment of the population that goes crazy,
They
you
they
know.
do. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and the other mathematical piece that's relevant is take carbon dioxide. If you ask a lot of the people that are protesting climate change, how much carbon dioxide is actually in the atmosphere,
Mhm.
and most of them cannot answer the question. I've seen this in Congress. I've seen senators and
Mhm.
congressmen not able to, and on committees about climate change, and they don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And it's not 25%, it's not 5%, it's 0.004, right?
Yeah.
And and take the Israeli Palestine thing. It's not math, but it's like, well, history. So if you're going to say river to the sea and you can't tell me the name of the river and you can't tell me the name of the
Mhm.
sea, what business do you have having this discussion at all?
Yeah.
Go look it up.
Yeah.
Go and then go to 50 to 100 years of history and study all of that and then come back and talk. Well, no, I'm not willing to do that. Then
Yeah.
politely shut the fuck up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I got to throw one last thing in there too about like you said about, because I think it's relevant to our podcast, right? The Imperfect Men's Club. One of there's two statistics that I recently um, came across that really are compelling, and one is uh, men suicide in men,
Hmm.
particularly middle-aged men. Right? You talk about an outrageous number
Hmm.
that not to compare it to the black men being killed by white police officer narrative, but a real significant problem in terms of that affects our everyday life. There is a increasing population of young men that are alone, isolated, that have checked out, and there's also an increasing, um, huge. I'm talking double-digit numbers of men that are depressed. They end up blowing their brains out
Dude,
as
there
they get
was
close to 60. Yeah.
just a guy, his name escapes me, but the PGA professional had killed himself a week ago. You know,
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
this guy to the outside world, this guy's on top of the world.
Yeah.
He's got
Yeah.
the world by the tail, as my
Yeah.
father would
No.
say.
No, I mentioned
And
that because I think that, that's part of our mission, right? Is to start
yeah,
talking about these things.
yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, no, I think this topic of critical thinking, I would throw it out there to, as we wrap up, I would throw it out there to anybody that's listening. I love having conversations around critical thinking with people with whom I disagree.
mhm.
And I encourage anybody that wants to reach out to either one of us, because I know you like it too. Is let's throw a topic out there and let's discuss it. I mean, we
Yeah.
could do a LinkedIn Live, we could do a Zoom call, we could do, and I think that if someone was authentically interested in arguing with me or with you
Mhm.
from an opposing position about something polarizing, I think if we both stayed authentic and did our best to
Yeah.
be kind and civil and thoughtful and reflective and listen well, I think the whole world benefits from those discussions, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Like I said, let's wrap up on this one. The last one is we just did the full circle on it is research
Hmm.
and analysis and evaluation. Those are but here's another statistic. That's why I don't know. I value the research because when you have facts and you have math to support a particular topic, it becomes more believable. But it also you can have a greater impact because you can push that out. Right? Another one
Yeah.
that I just think someone across about back to men. Did you
Hmm.
know that 50%, up to 50% of incarceration rate, just men in
Hmm.
jail have some kind of neurodiversity problem,
Yeah.
dyslexia being the biggest one of those. So
Hmm.
these are
Hmm.
so we know without a question, without a shadow of a doubt, that the frustration that they experience with through school or just the way their brains think leads them to commit a crime. Right? Most of the
Hmm.
time, it's because they're self-medicating with drugs, or they're so frustrated with life that they do stupid shit. And I can relate to that because I've done my fair share of stupid shit.
Well, you've told me, and it makes perfect sense to me that the frustration around being
Yes.
called stupid
Yeah,
or being made fun of,
that's right.
that's just another form of bullying, and that's a toxic word. But I
Yeah, but
think
they also make great drug dealers.
yeah, yeah,
That's why
yeah.
they're in jail. They also
Well,
make
you
great
think of
salesmen because that's how they can sell their drugs.
yep.
Those same skills, which by the way are all critical thinking skills, applied to other things in life. They
Oh
just
yeah,
couldn't. Yeah. So that, yeah, thanks for kind of setting me up on the kicker on that one. It
yeah,
doesn't mean they don't have valuable critical. They do have critical thinking skills. That's how they're able to survive. They
yeah.
just
They
have
fall
they can't
down.
apply it to say it's a traditional job, or
Yeah,
certainly
they
can't
fall.
apply it to our educational system. And that's the
They
other one. That's 80, not surprisingly, 80% of them didn't graduate from high school. Huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's really data. I mean, the challenge with research is, all these fact checkers and the veracity of a particular source. Um, I think my closing thought, and I've got so many, but my closing thought is, when you see something on the news, typically an accident or a
Yeah.
murder or a rape, something bad, and the news, they want to be first
Yeah.
right? They don't want to be right. They want to be first. And they all are willing to sacrifice veracity to be first. I don't look at anything on the news from any
I
source
know.
and say, I know what I'm looking at or I know what I'm hearing. This is the beginning of my journey if I choose to take it. And I need a lot more context. I want to know what happened 2 weeks before then. And I want to know what's happening 2 weeks after that. And I'm just picking 2 weeks, but I need a period of time. And to your math analogy, you take a chart and you show me 1960 to 2000, I'm going to get a specific picture. But if you go back to 1900 and take it all the way to 2024, you could conceivably be looking at completely the opposite data, right?
Interesting. Yeah, you're
And
right.
that's your point, the hockey stick thing, right? Well, you're not showing me we got 1,000 years of weather history or
Yeah,
200
that's
years
a
of
good
weather
point. You
history,
have to
whatever.
establish a time stamp or a time period, even in the very beginning to be objective. You have to at
Yeah,
least establish that. Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned timing because you're right. Those things vary all the time.
yeah,
So,
they do.
anyway, good stuff, Mark. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm a huge fan of critical thought. I'm to your point, I'm grateful to my dad for kind of infecting me with that disease at a young age. And I think that the challenge is, how do you remain respectful while questioning everything? Because it's like, think of your interactions with doctors and your children. They don't like questions. They get offended by questions. Many of them do. But I think you have to figure out a way to be able to question people in a civil fashion without being accusatory, because otherwise you're just dealing with emotions and opinions. And like I said, I think that's okay as long as that's all you're dealing with, that you're not seeking the truth about this, you're just emoting about it and you're entitled to those emotions. But
Yep,
I think that if we could get better at critical thinking as a country, as a society, a lot of these other issues that we're challenged with would just start to go away. I really do.
I agree. I
All
don't
right,
know about
Jim.
completely go away, but they would be
They would
reduced.
start, they would start, they would begin to recede a little bit. And then over
Yeah,
time, I think we'd be pretty amazed at what might happen. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, we'll probably talk about this in some additional capacity because it's such a rich topic, but I
yeah.
enjoyed that today and we'll talk to you next week.
All right.